and then record. Okay, round two, everyone. Welcome. This is Albert, CEO of Bitcoin Startup Lab. Welcome to the Who's Who on a Founder's Journey into Bitcoin Interview Series, where are going to invite 30 of the top innovators and contributors to Bitcoin in 2023 to the show. The reason why we've come together as a community to do this is to celebrate innovation and significant achievements on Bitcoin so that we reinforce and grow the innovation culture on Bitcoin. Significant achievements on Bitcoin are things that were done for the first time ever or setting new records to push forward the innovation frontier on Bitcoin. This show is brought to you by the Bitcoin Startup Lab, a top pre-accelerator in the Bitcoin ecosystem. We help people turn their ideas into investment-worthy startups on Bitcoin. And a big shout out to our media partners, BTC Inc., parent company of Bitcoin Magazine. They're the top media on Bitcoin, and Crypto Slate, a crypto agnostic media platform that is bringing the latest happenings on Bitcoin to the rest of the crypto world. And a big thank you to all our teams and all the guest speakers that have come together to make this show possible and accelerate the advent of the Bitcoin economy. So it brings me great pleasure to introduce to everyone our special guest today, Trevor Owens. Some of you may know him as CEO of Ninja Alerts, or the GP of Bitcoin Frontier Fund, or the Lean Startup Master. But today, we're going to bring him on as the co-creator of the Ordinal Show, which became the most significant cultural show spearheading the Ordinals movement on Bitcoin. They're the first and longest running in this category. All right. Hi, Trevor. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Albert.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, we promised people a origin story today, right? Because as we're talking about it, and the reason why you're willing to come on the show is by sharing our origin stories, it inspires more people to want to come to Bitcoin and build on Bitcoin. And together we'll achieve a sustainable Bitcoin economy. So how about we take it from the top before you even became a founder? How does that sound?
Sounds great. You want me to start? Just tell the story?
Yeah. I think some of the people, your fans here, including myself, we know we know about the first or I think it's the first one, but maybe there's a side hustle or something before the electric bike case study. Let's go back before that.
I mean, there is a side hustle before that. I mean, in high school, I started a web design company with a friend of mine. I think you go through many evolutions and growth as an individual over the course of your life. I think early on, I didn't necessarily identify as an entrepreneur. Wanted to do business, wanted to be entrepreneurial. Didn't necessarily identify as a tech entrepreneur. Those are all things I kind of discovered over time. And I think even to this day, throughout some of the lessons that I've learned, the failures that I've experienced, I've even been where it's like I'm 100% convinced I'm can only be an entrepreneur and that nothing else will work and like this is what I meant to do. And then you have doubts and you're like, maybe I shouldn't be an entrepreneur. Human beings are complex, but I think for me, I was lucky to have probably some early life influences. I think this is very common among many entrepreneurs. Like my father is very entrepreneurial, and while he mainly in the domain of real estate, like he bought a lot of houses when he was younger than me now, like maybe his late 20s, fixed them up, kind of invested in them. He also traveled around the world. He's a merchant marine, so he would bring grain to a lot of other countries. So that was kind of normal for me as a kid, like for my male role model, let's say. But then I think things really kicked off for me in high school when I was a part of this this group called FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America. And what it was this the school club that I forget how I joined. Maybe it was the manager of the wrestling team, Jill, who was like the smartest person I knew in high school. got me into it. Got to go to like this conference for free, and you'd like do a competition. Like they would have like these tests and different competitions you could do on different topics like accounting, finance, whatever. I was the only one who went for like programming, so I like would do the like C++ competition, and then later like the web design competition, and I would win every year because there wasn't that much competition, and also I guess like you know decent at it. So then I would get this free trip to go to the nationals to compete. When the nationals would be like in really cool places like Miami, Nashville, Florida, etc. And there would be a lot of uh like business speakers, like like people who are entrepreneurs, and they would come and they would like give sessions, and it was like a full conference that you could attend as someone who's like a high school, like a teenager, right? And so there were some really impactful and motivational speakers that I got to listen to there about entrepreneurship that I think catalyzed me to be interested in starting businesses. And for me, I think it goes back to always being like I don't know, like a little bit of a different kid growing up. Like I was into sports, but also quite a bit of a nerd and didn't have a lot of friends. So like I had that like chip on my shoulder, that desire to like do something much bigger. And I think that catalyzed like some of the motivation from those speakers that I heard. I remember one summer, I think it was also like maybe like my girlfriend broke up with me or something like that. That summer, like my first girlfriend in high school broke up with me, and then like I was really motivated. So I spent the whole summer with one of my good friends who was also very entrepreneurial, and started some businesses. And today he's actually been quite successful. He exited a company recently, and we would just like spend the whole summer like talking about business ideas, going to the library, reading books on like business and stuff like that. Like real cute stuff that you could see as a high school kid doing, right? And then so that was like my first foray, like trying to start a web design business. And then in university, of course, I started the scooter business, which is like the failure that everybody knows about from the lean startup case study. And then I had a really impactful mentor in undergrad, and actually I had a lot of I think I had a lot of educational opportunities as an entrepreneur. I had a ton, actually, looking back on it, thinking about it now. Like I had those opportunities in high school, which I think is very rare. Actually, when I went to university, so first I went to university at Iowa State. I wanted to walk onto the wrestling team there, got injured, couldn't do that. They had a fantastic entrepreneurship program, like one of the best, probably in the country. Like it's not ranked, but I mean, in terms of the benefits and actual community and resources that they offer you, like you basically get like, if you join the entrepreneurship program, like you get like, a scholarship, you get to like go to another conference in Chicago called the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization, which was another huge, like impactful conference that motivated me a lot. I met a lot of great young entrepreneurs there. And then of course I started the scooter business. I mean, there were a lot of like, I think spiritual or personal like things that I am fortunate enough to have experienced that like led me to like be all in and being an entrepreneur. And then the next one was when I actually transferred my junior year to NYU Stern undergrad finance program, and wanted to go to Wall Street. Thought that's what I would do. And then one of my friends who I actually met in a Chinese language placement exam, who was sitting in front of me, was a guy named Mel, who was also transferring in. And he told me, I was like just DMing him. I was just DMing him on Gmail chat. Like remember back in the day when people were using Gmail chat, for those of you who are old enough to know. I was like, dude, what class are you taking? He's like, well, I'm like, what's the best class you're taking? He's like, I'm in this one class. It's an entrepreneurship class. You won't believe it. The professor is a VC and he's wearing like a $100,000 three-piece suit. Like this guy's a baller. And like, as soon as he said that, I immediately like dropped like 3 classes and signed up for that class. And that was like, and this is a guy named Larry Lenehan, who was the founder of First Mark Capital. He's like the first investor in Pinterest, Second Market, which was Barry Silbert's company that he exited before he got into Bitcoin. And also First Check in like Riot Games, which made League of Legends and sold to Tencent for like $500 million. And this guy was just the man. Like this guy was just the best, like the most inspiring person, smart, one of the smartest people. Um, I joined that class. First day, I sat in the front row. The guy sitting next to me, I ended up starting a company with in that class. Sergey Nazarov, who founded Chainlink, by the way. And actually, that class at NYU Stern became like the alumni from that class are doing crazy stuff. Like Kyle Samani, who started Multicoin, is from that class. A lot of people actually in the crypto, impressive people in the crypto space. And so I had like these moments, and even after taking this class, like I was still thinking like, oh, I should go to Wall Street. But he was just like, I would ask him in the class, and I actually would go back to the class like and audit it, almost 3 years in a row. Like I would always be there. He'd bring me back in to speak. And I'd ask like, hey, should I work for a company? Should I, start a business now? What should I do? He had always said that like the older you get, the harder it is to be a founder. So because you have more to lose. And so, and he was right. Like he had like all these like great wisdoms that he was right about. And he said, if you have an idea, start now. That was his thing. He was like, if you have an idea, I was like, should I get domain expertise? Because he would say people with domain expertise tend to be more successful as founders. And he would just say, if you have an idea, start now. And so one day that just like hit me in the head, like that idea. And that's when I started Lean Startup Machine was the first thing. And from here I am today, like it's just been grinding ever since. So there are a lot of formative experiences that I'm very fortunate enough to have that led me down that path to being a founder. And then coming into Bitcoin was also maybe a happy accident. I mean, I bought Bitcoin in 2013. I wouldn't consider myself a ideological person or like someone who is motivated. I think the idea of separating money from the state is a great mission. Like if we can achieve it. So for me, it's like I'm someone who has to see something can be achieved. And I think in 2021, I've known the founders of Saks, Ryan Shea, Manib Ali since I met Manib, I think in 2013, 2012. I knew Ryan since around 2010. And I've been following what they're doing, and they've always done an excellent job. And in 2021, when I saw things kicking off, I quickly did a 180 from being like blockchain technology is never going to make it to being like it's here. Once I saw the actual applications that people had built, and then looking at what Stacks was doing, seeing a bigger opportunity on Bitcoin. I don't build on Bitcoin because only because I like it. I do like it, but I build on it because I think it's the biggest opportunity. I'm a very like practical, focused person. And I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, I mean, the entrepreneurship, of course, is very risky. But the majority of wealth is created, and the majority of, new millionaires are entrepreneurs, right? And so it just makes sense if you're a very ambitious person. I think the other benefit of being an entrepreneur is really that it's like playing the game of life on the hardest mode. It's like if you want to actually develop yourself and grow yourself, and which is probably, I think, in addition to if we say like the meaning of life is to be happy, to be satisfied with your life, then I think that your career is a big part of that. And if you play the game in the hardest mode, it's like, when Gohan in Dragon Ball Z trains in the hyperbolic time chamber, it's like, that was like when I was growing up. It's like, I would watch Dragon Ball Z, and when Gohan would get ready to fight, the Frieza, who's like the enemy, he would train in the hyperbolic time chamber, which would be like an environment that has like 1,000 times the gravity of the Earth. And so being an entrepreneur is like training in 1,000 times gravity. And like you're most likely going to fail like the first few times, but you're going to be in a position where the second time, the third time, it's like a walk in the park. So, that's why I'm most glad about being an entrepreneur. And I think that it gives you, it doesn't only affect like, your abilities and your competency, but it also affects generally how you think about the world. And your ability to do everything else in your life. And so, yeah, that's my answer to how I became a founder.
Super. That was wonderful. Let me unpack a little bit. And the last thing you said, we may fail the first time, but we become closer to success because of that failure. So, I mean, that's something I'd like to point out is that I think most people make the mistake of seeing failure as a failure. But for us who have been knocked down and gotten back up, we know now that that's not really a failure. It's more like success is like you have this big vessel where you're or maybe you can think about it as like we're going through a jungle and success is crossing a chasm to get on the other side to get to where you're going, and that chasm is deep. It's deep, if especially if you're going somewhere other people have not gone before. So a failure is actually every time you fail, you're throwing like a bunch of boulders into that chasm until you fail enough times, and that chasm fills up, and you just walk across. And that's why it looks like, wow, when that guy succeeded, it looks so easy. But no, it's like 1,000 failures building up to that point where it just makes it easy when you cross the chasm, right? So thanks for sharing all that, your journey into entrepreneurship. Let's dive into that because a lot of interesting things. I hope everyone's paying attention. And if you're resonating, but like we invited people up here who are still fairly young, right? So, when we first started, it probably wasn't that long ago. So you guys, we just might be a few years ahead of you, right? So if you feel like you're like sort of a contrarian, or maybe even like if you feel like you're different from other people in your university or school, right? That might be a sign, your early sign that you're an entrepreneur, right? Look at Trevor, right? He thought he was like different from the other kids, right? People picked other topics. He picked how to code, right? That's another indicator that we've seen is that entrepreneurs, when they're young, they do, doesn't matter like what the activity is, right? It could be intellectual, it could be physical, but they tend to like want to win. They're competitive in nature, and they've had experience winning, and basically leveling themselves up and developing like this self faith, or it's beyond confidence. It's sort of like you win enough times, you feel like, hey, if I work at it, I'm going to get better at it, right? And it takes that kind of self faith to get started. So this is really great, Trevor, that you share your experience with people. I'm hoping it's inspiring some people to want to start up. And what better place to start up right now than Bitcoin, right? Because it is a blue ocean, is ground zero right now, right? The rest of the crypto world has developed a lot. Bitcoin is just starting this year, and we're going to get to how Trevor, you and your team are spearheading this renaissance on Bitcoin, right? But before we get to that, let's walk through the valley of death, so to speak, right? like all the trials and tribulations that help you throw those boulders into the chasm, right? Until you go walk across, right? And make it look easy. So let's go to I remember the first one you said you had like a web design company in high school. Like how did you start that? And like what was the inspiration there?
Well, the friend that I was working with had already been doing like web design consulting for different businesses, and so I kind of like joined him and we started something new. We didn't have many. I don't even know if we even got a client. Like we just spent most of the summer like learning and like studying how to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, cool.
But I had already built websites. I was interested in building websites since I was like 13, because I was a big gamer, and I created like a StarCraft guild and a Diablo 2 guild, and made the websites for that. So it's like
Oh,
kind of
very
just like low hanging fruit, but it wasn't really like I wouldn't even call it a business. It was like an attempt at a business. Um, yeah.
super. And let's then we fast forward. You were inspired by this VC at NYU, right? A professor.
Larry Linehan, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love what he says. Like the older you get, the harder it gets. That's Trevor. I mean, I don't know about you, but when we do recruiting events, we always get people saying, hey, I want to get this experience, and 2 years later, I'm going to start. Right. And then 2 years later, if like the ones that you keep in touch with, like they haven't started yet. And they say, I want to get this piece of experience and then I'm going to start. Right. Have you encountered people like that? I mean, in your over 1 decade now of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's always easy to push it off. I mean, I usually lose touch with those people, honestly, because like, it's like I don't hear from them again. So yeah, I think it really depends on like what your life situation is. If you're young, if you're in your 20s and you want to be an entrepreneur in the future and you're not starting now, you are going to hurt your future success. Like it's going to be hard now. It's like you don't need, like I had a lot of friends who wanted to be entrepreneurs, but then they went to like work at a company or work at Wall Street or McKinsey or whatever. They wanted that like brand name behind them. I really don't think I think there's more to lose from that than there is to gain from it, to be honest. You don't need a brand name behind you to be an entrepreneur. If anything, like if you're not ready, like the best thing would be to work at a startup, would be to work at a startup where it's funded, where the founders are excellent. Ideally, it's going to be, if you can work at a startup that's going to be successful, it's really hard. It's really hard to pick which one to work at. But you can learn a lot from that experience that I think will help you with starting a company. You'll also be able to, if the startup is successful, now you have a bunch of angel investors to get going. But otherwise, like if you don't know how to pick the right company to work for, or you don't want to pick the wrong company, the wrong startup to join, just start something. Like that's like the most like straightforward path to becoming a successful entrepreneur. Now it becomes complicated if you're older, if you have family, if you have bills to pay. You do want to be more surgical and more careful about exactly how you start. You want to have enough savings, and you also want to be able to know when to throw in the towel, because you need to be like more like, like a team that produces a movie. Like when in Hollywood and teams produce a movie, how does it work? Like a producer gets together with another producer. They try to like recruit the team first. Like they try to look for, they have some conversations with usually like a script writer first. They usually prepare the script first. They pitch it to some investors. And so like sometimes like the movie doesn't get any traction, then they just like stop it, move on to the next one, or they stop it. They maybe go back to like how they earn some income, or they're earning some income on the side while they're doing it. Again, if you're in your 20s, it's so easy. None of this stuff you're not going to need to do any of this stuff. And that's why it's like better to start when you're younger, because it's really about like not how much experience you have. It's about how much experience you have as a founder. That matters, right? And the only way to get experience is to be a founder. It's like, when I was in high school, I was captain of the wrestling team, and ended up doing quite well at the state level. But I always thought like, hey, if I'm stronger, if I go to the gym and I can bench press more, I'll be a better wrestler, right? Turns out that's completely wrong. Like it doesn't matter how strong you are. It matters like how good you are, how good your technique is, how good your timing is. And the only way to get that is to wrestle more, right? So I think people often think like doing something else that the skill or the experience will translate into what they actually want to do or in the future, but it's usually almost never the case. Like the best way to become a good founder is to get as much experience as possible, to get mentors, and also to if you have to, learn from, like, work at a startup where you can learn from another great founder. And there's if like whenever I hear people say like that they're like, oh, I just don't have an idea, that's always like the worst one. I'm sure you've heard that before, but it's like the idea is not important. Like you don't need an idea to start. Like you need a team to start, right? You need a team to start, you need commitment to start, and you need an area of focus. Like actually sometimes starting without not having an idea is actually better than having an idea sometimes, because people who have an idea fall in love with it, and then they're not able to pivot when that idea is not going to work. And so I think people do make up a lot of reasons why they don't want to start, but I also think maybe those people aren't cut out for it. Maybe it's not right for them. And the people who have almost like no other choice but to be a founder usually end up being the best founders. So
Yeah, those are great insights. I mean, it is it's sort of weird, right, Trevor, when I think about it, because we know that if we want to get a doctor, we definitely want to find the one with more experience, right? The more experience a doctor has, then the more chance that they're going to take care of us well, right? We're not going to go to a doctor who was a awesome lawyer or awesome, like, let's say, awesome athlete, maybe Tiger Woods, and then he becomes a doctor. You're not going to go to him to become, for your health, right? You're going to go to the doctor with the experience. And we know this. We know this subconsciously. Like, this is like, everyone knows this. But then when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's like we magically think other skills can transfer over. But the reality is that what I've seen is that 99% of the things that we learned before, if we're doing a disruptive startup, it doesn't even translate over. It's just that 1%, maybe the science that translates over, right? Like you said, like the team, or like like watching your costs while you want to create more value than your overhead, right? Like there's certain like universal truths, but in terms of like those skill sets, that's the paradox. I don't know why people don't get it, but then I was just playing through the reel of all the people that didn't go to McKinsey or didn't go to Goldman Sachs, right, but succeeded. And who are they? Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. The list goes on and on and on. Right. In fact, it's like the needle in a haystack that they go to some branded company and they become a brilliantly successful entrepreneur. Like it becomes like exponentially harder. It's like those skill sets are almost like they're like polar opposites, right? They're training you in a different way. Yeah. So that's great. I mean, just especially when we're young, right? When we're in our 20s, most likely you don't have a house mortgage, right? Most likely you're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have responsibilities, right? You could just do it. And just when I play back the reel, my friends who started when they're early in their 20s, even if they end up not doing entrepreneurship, now that I think of it, their careers are way more advanced than people who never tried entrepreneurship in their 20s. Like just like way more advanced, they're, yeah, this is, so it's actually the risk nowadays, now that there's so much knowledge out there and so many case studies, and it's just statistics, right? We have so much history to draw from just in recent days, in the last, say, 20 years, right? We know that actually the right move is to start something up, right? And then now, but of course, there's the very difficult way to start something up, and then there's the difficult way, but then the way where, how do you say, like, going back to your analogy about wrestling, right? If you use a wrong technique, you're gonna hurt yourself. You can use like all your strength, but not get anywhere. But at the same time, if you use the right technique, you don't have to use as much strength, but you get a lot more results. And this is what we're talking about. Like,
leverage, right? Like in wrestling, it's like if you can have your grip like 1 inch further down on someone's like leg or on their arm when you're doing a move on them, you're going to be a lot stronger, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so these tricks, right? These are sort of like a bunch of these tricks added together. That's the lean startup methodology, right? So let's jump into that. So, like, I see somebody just jumping in, so let me just do a quick chronological thing. So, in school, you did like a web design company, right? It was like an attempt at your first business, and then was this in university when you did the scooter?
Yeah, and
or was there something in between?
Yeah, the scooter one was the next one. That was when I was at Iowa State before.
All right, cool. All right, so this is like your next attempt, but this one you like sort of went like the full 9 yards on, right? Which led you down like the journey of lean startup and innovating like an even better version, from my opinion, on lean startup, right? Can you sort of give us a level of that?
And in between that was when I did Larry Linehan's class and I started a startup. It was actually called Exist Local. I think Sergey still has it actually in his LinkedIn. I saw it like a couple years ago. But Sergey and Ezra founded Chainlink. We were in the same entrepreneurship class together. We started a company called Exist Local in Larry Linehan's class. And Larry Linehan's whole thing was like very much actually like lean startup. Like he always said, his name of his class was ready, fire, aim. It's supposed to be ready, aim, fire, but his ready, fire, aim. And he said that like the cost of planning is more expensive than the cost of failing, right? And so if you focus your time on planning, you're actually losing money compared to then if you just do it and fail. And so that was his whole thing. It was very much like lean startup. Eric put a more like technical academic like lens on it. He just had like I've been a VC for 20 years. Here's what I've learned take on it. And the funny thing was that in his class, he had this is like NYU Stern undergrad where it's like super competitive. There's a very intense grading curve. And the grading curve means that like only a small percentage of people in a class can get an A. And it's like, however, if like other students do better, you do worse kind of a thing, right? And so everybody's like super competitive about grades and getting an A. And he said in the class, the whole point was start a business, okay? And if your business gets $1 in real revenue, this is after 6 months of one semester. If any business gets $1 in real revenue, like $1, everyone gets an automatic A in your team, right? Because like every person in the class formed a startup. Not one person got a dollar in revenue for any of the businesses. We were the closest. I think we were the only team who got an A in the class because we were like, we took it very seriously. We loved it.
But wait, hold on. This is a class where you have the founder, Chainlink, and all those other people.
Yeah, well, the other people like Cost Money was the year after us, and
oh, okay, all right, but still, though, these are like in the future they become successful, right? So like, but this time there's like like ground zero right now, like level 0 for entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, so there's a great lesson learned there, right? Okay.
Yeah. So then when I started Lean Startup Machine, it was like a combination of like what I was learning from Eric Ries and then Larry Linehan in that class, and like the whole concept was. It was like I just copied from the class. It was like we have a weekend to start a business. If you get it and like use a lean startup method, do something like that's a real tech kind of business that you want to do. If you get $1 in revenue, you get that. Like you don't get a point for anything. You don't get a point for the pitch. You don't get a point for building something, hacking together. You only get a point if you get $1 in revenue. And like the person who makes the most revenue, for their idea in the weekend is the winner. And that was the whole idea, kind of inspired by that. And then like, adding lean startup on top of that. So. And the result was like, from doing this the very first time, actually, Larry didn't have the idea of pivoting. I think that was the one thing that he didn't have. I mean, he had something like that, but like in the lean startup and Eric, it's like, there's only 3 ideas: minimum viable product, pivoting, early adopters. Like that's it. It's like, pivoting is like a third of the whole thing, and probably the most underrated tool, right? So we ran the first lean startup machine. Every single, like we had like 75 people, 15 different teams pitching ideas that we're very confident about. Every single team by the end of the 3 days pivoted, most of them more than once. Like I've never seen a startup that was successful that didn't pivot.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So, I mean, I think even with PayPal, right? When Elon Musk and Peter Thiel joined forces, they before they joined forces and before they did PayPal, they were doing other things. Like Elon Musk wanted to do like a full-on online banking, right? And then he had to pivot. He was forced to pivot many times. Yeah, pivoting is I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of a founder. I mean, like the fundamental aspect of that is agility or mental flexibility, right? Adaptability to new situations. And pivoting is just one way that trait is emulated in the startup journey. Now, for those of you just joining us now, I want to sort of give everyone some context. Trevor was talking about Eric Ries and some other people. So this is my 10th year doing pre-acceleration, and I've searched far and wide. We've researched many different startup methods, and I've met maybe like even over 1,000 now people who are qualified to be mentors. People who have had significant cash events, serial entrepreneurs, right? And I've searched far and wide for the best mentors in every category, and that's probably one of the reasons why we're the maybe top 3 pre-accelerators in the world. The world's a big place, so I'm afraid to say number 1, but definitely in the
number one in Web3.
number 1 in Web3 for sure. Yeah, so thank you for that, Trevor. So just to give you guys some background, the lean startup methodology was started in Silicon Valley by Steve Blank. Some of you might know this history. And then Steve Blank, like his best protege is this guy called Eric Ries, right? And then Eric Ries, which some of you know, created or wrote the book Lean Startup. It's the blue book with the white circle in the middle, right? And then and Eric Ries's best protege is Trevor, right? And I was like, when Trevor told me about this, I'm like, yeah, really? But then through my journey and my search for the best mentors, I found it to be true. I found it to be true that Trevor is in my opinion, or in my experience, the best lean startup mentor I've ever met. And so the interesting thing about Steve Blank, sort of like what was the analogy you gave before?
Yeah, I used to use this joke. I'm like, if this was Star Wars, if Lean Startup was Star Wars, Steve Blank is the Emperor, Eric Ries is Darth Vader, and I'm Luke Skywalker.
All right, right, yeah, exactly, right. So they all like did something with the Force, right? They all like developed their own style of the Force, right? And like put a spin on it, right? So what was your spin?
Well,
like,
I used to get this question from journalists a lot who would like cover our events and cover Lean Startup. They would like ask me about Steve Blank and Eric Ries. So I just throw that quote in there to make them laugh, kind of thing. So what was the question there?
Yeah, the question is, I mean, they like just going on with the Star Wars analogy, right? With the Emperor, Darth Vader, and Luke Skywalker, they all have their own style of the Force, right? So Steve Blank, Eric Ries, and you, how did you evolve it, right? You took it to many countries, over 50, right? Trained hundreds of thousands of founders in this methodology, and thereby honing your skill as a coach and mentor in this methodology. But also you guys innovated some things. What were some of the things you innovated for the startup, for the lean startup methodology?
Yeah, well, I think I really specialized in from idea to validation. So the lean startup is a framework or a model that should span the life cycle of a company, of a startup, until you exit, or until you enter a environment where you're not innovating anymore, right? It's like and I think Eric was primarily a CTO who understood business quite well and was very interested in user experience and things like that. I think people tend to view it through a lens of what they're good at and where they focus their time. Another person I learned a lot from was Brant Cooper, who was a CMO of many early stage or mid-sized startups over the years. Also learned a lot from I'm trying to give like an example of someone else, but you'll see this pattern. Like Sean Ellis was the person I was thinking of, who created the term growth hacking. He was a VP of marketing at Dropbox and a lot of early stage startups. So there's a lot of marketing aspect to it, but there's also an engineering side. There's also a UX designer side to it, and people view it through different lenses. So I think when Eric wrote the book, he told me when he wrote the book that he actually intentionally made it a little more vague or high level, so that way the book could be valuable for longer, because as soon as you start to give more opinionated recommendations, those tend to expire, or they tend to the more prescriptive you try to be, if people are going to read his book 30 years from now, if he said you need to have a team that can work from home, that 30 years from now, who knows what that's going to be. So he was intentionally kind of vague, and I think also he didn't have the experience of what we end up developing, which is that we just had almost like a laboratory. The Lean Startup Machine was essentially a laboratory for entrepreneurship. We tested things every single weekend with the founders, giving them different goals, giving them different ways of looking at it. We changed we always have a guidebook with the best principles, the best articles from different mentors, and the best techniques. And we would just change that every single weekend. We would try a different technique with 50 different entrepreneurs. And so it was a laboratory for entrepreneurship. I think that really helped us to take the idea from a theory or from a framework into like a set of tools. And so, initially we created the validation board, which was like the first tool. Then we end up creating the experiment board. Shout out to Grace, who was like the mastermind behind the visual framework for that. And what we did was we just like studied the most successful teams in the program. So we would like see which teams did the best in the 3-day program, going from like an idea to pivoting to validating. And like validating will be measured by how much revenue they get, how many users they get, how much what the user feedback is, and what the like learnings that they got from each pivot were. And in the final presentation, like they would explain how they did it, and then we would just like look at what the best teams did, look at what the worst teams did, and then we would reverse engineer that to give that as tools for everybody else as the program grew. So it was really about like firsthand experience, seeing what's working, and then turning those into tools is like what I spent like, a decade doing, and then doing with enterprise.
Wow. So a decade. So this is with enterprise and also with grassroots entrepreneurs. So that's taking the same methodology, but putting in different situations definitely develops a lot of mastery and a deeper insight than the average practitioner. Thanks for sharing that. So it's been over a decade. So, all right. So after NYU Stern, you started the lean startup machine, right?
Yep.
And how long did that last? How long did it take you guys to take this to over 50 countries and train hundreds of thousands of founders? I'm just going to fast forward through this part.
Yeah,
So
it's hard to say. My memory, like I don't fully recall. Like it grew really fast. I mean, I think we had product market fit pretty clearly within the first year. We used the product market fit survey that Sean Ellis created. How disappointed would you be if you could not have attended this program? And we would get like 70%. And then, there was like one event like that was after a year where I could really clearly feel people thought like this is the best thing that they've ever seen, kind of a thing.
Awesome.
And, then I just expanded it. I mean, hire like, I remember there was a moment when, I don't really do this anymore, but I did do this like back in the day when I was first entrepreneur, but I would like set an unreasonable goal that I just would scare me, and then I would just like try to achieve it. So I remember when I was like lying in bed one time, right? And I was like, had been thinking about this for a while. I'm like, we need to be able to grow this. Like, how am I going to grow this? We were doing it in like the cities where we had contacts. Like we're doing it in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, I think Boston, like the easy ones, main tech tiers. And then I was like, okay, but how am I going to grow? So I have no idea. So the first step for me was just telling everyone I'm going to do it. Like that was like the first step. It was like, okay, I remember writing an email being like, we're going to expand to 50 cities this year. And I was like lying in bed at like 1 a.m. I'm like, oh shit. Like, I'm like, should I not? I'm like, I shouldn't. I was like nervous about sending this email. And all it was like, hey, we're going to expand to 50 cities. We'd love your help. And this is like our email newsletter to everybody. And I'm like, I have no idea how we're going to do this. But like, and actually it was in that moment when I realized that I was afraid to send that email that I had this moment of self-awareness. I was like, I have to do this. I was like, like, it was like a feeling of fear that didn't make sense. Right. So I was like, people love this. I can do it. Like all the logical reasons made sense, but then I'm still afraid to do it. And so when I identified that, I was like, all right, like it actually made me more excited because I was like, I can basically feel the limit of my comfort zone, and going outside that is where the magic happens. And so like when we decided to grow it, it was like just sending out that email. And then it just, I don't know, it just magically came together. Like we figured it out, there was like a couple of years where I was like on a plane every single weekend. I would go to all the workshops myself around the world. So I was like on a plane every single weekend. I was young, so I thought that was super cool, like to be on a plane every single weekend, to go to like the airport. And then, it just grew from like US to like we do it in another country. Typically it was like people who would attend the workshop, people would actually fly in for the workshop from around the world as well. So like we would get someone who would fly in for the workshop from like the UK, and then they'd be like, "Hey, Trevor, this is really awesome. Like, we need to host it in London. Like, can I help? Can I help you?" You know what I'm saying? And it just like it had that built-in growth flywheel in the product itself, right? And that was really key to like how fast it grew. Was that people like the growth was built in. People would come to the workshop and then they want to host it somewhere else. And so all I had to do was like work with them, fly out, and we would like sell the tickets before the event, right? So that was also key, is that we had a business model where we could sell the tickets in advance. If we don't sell enough tickets, we cancel the event and refund people, right? So we could also like kind of test the demand and expand that way. And that was also really key.
Yeah, I was seeing how this is all coming together, because you're great at creating communities on Web3. So I'm sort of seeing like connecting the dots here. It's really interesting. But I think the most pivotal moment is like when you're about to send that email, that fear, right? I think a lot of people are not aware of that fear, and maybe they may just like subconsciously, when they feel the fear, they turn off or they shy away. But you're able to sort of hold that moment and realize that, and hey, I'm going to take the next step forward, right? And I think that's another hallmark of great entrepreneurs, is that, hey, the fear is natural. Fear is natural, but when we have fear, we realize it, and we're going to take that step forward to see what happens, right? And like in a reasonable way, right? So that's
I would actually go further to say that when you like, finding where that fear is the most important thing for you to grow to the next level. Like, it's probably something that's in the back of your mind that you're not even aware of. It's subconscious for a long time. And maybe it's even like, we have a ton of founders that it's very clear what they need to do to be successful, but they're unable to do it, right? And maybe they're not even aware of why they're limiting themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're able to recognize that and find that, it's actually the best thing that can happen to you, because then you can consciously make the decision to step forward. And in that moment, that decision is going to put you on a path that's going to take you to the next level, guaranteed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. I mean, I think it's something that we always have to be sort of cognizant about, right? I mean, I from time to time, I find myself procrastinating with something. Like, it's on my mind, but I just haven't taken action, although I could have taken action like that day, right? And it starts dragging on. And then that's the trigger for me. I'm like, why did it take me like a few days to even like get around to the first step on this? And then back, there's some kind of fear, right? Yeah. So it's that journey in itself is very enriching. That journey in itself is enriching. So guys, we have about 25 minutes left. We have a few other topics. Look, Trevor's origin story is so rich that this is 1.5 hours is not going to cover it, but we schedule 1.5 hours. Trevor has to bounce after this, so let me give you guys some topics. Maybe like when we open up a Q&A, you could probably ask these topics, or you can ask the questions that you want, right? But here's some other topics that we hope to cover, right? Trevor's what was the most painful experience like during his entrepreneur process? This is something I want to ask him, right? His ups and downs. Another one was, how did you get into Bitcoin? You alluded to that a little bit, but we want to find out more about that. And of course, there's other things that we want to know about, like, how did you come to start the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, right? And how did you come to Ninja Alerts? And of course, the main topic is really why you and your co-creators created the Ordinal Show. It's become the most, well, first of all, longest running. It also has like, I think the most people that logged on, right, for the Ordinals topic, and also sort of became like the almost like a innovation or idea, like a melting pot, right? Like almost like a spearhead for everything's Ordinal for the Bitcoin Renaissance. So this is very significant. It's not easy to maintain something twice a week, right? For over 6 months now. Right. So and it's brought a lot of new inspiration. It's created new friendships, right? And we've seen a lot of innovation come out of this show. Maybe we could skip to that one for just like a few minutes, and then we could cut over to Q&A. How's that sound? Like
Great.
Start what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, I mean, that started because I was building, over the years I did Lean Startup Education Company. We started building tools and software to help people apply Lean Startup model. That was very, very challenging. We launched like 5 different products. One of them did decently well, but nothing was like a breakout. One of them I think made like $1 million in revenue, but nothing venture scale. We did raise venture capital. That was a problem. But that was a good experience. And in 2021, I kind of still in the same market, knowing what I know best. I've been running accelerators. At that point, ran an accelerator for SSV, ran an accelerator for Google. And then, so I wanted to create software to help make accelerators run better, and I was, doing consulting and also development most of the time. Actually I had a great lifestyle back then. Being a developer is like the best lifestyle. You wake up when you want, you code, and you like get immediate gratification of like code compiling and things working and seeing it come together. And so I was building this accelerator software. We had actually won a pretty big startup competition in South Korea, where I was with my co-founder Shihun, who's now working with me on Ninja Alerts. And so I just hit up the Stacks ecosystem when I saw Stacks launch. Again, I was early advisor. Never sold any of my advisor shares or anything like that. Just held on to it, which was difficult at times because there were times where I was like, man, I could really use a few bucks here. But nonetheless, Stacks launched 2.0. So I hit them up and said, hey, you guys need accelerator software. And they were like, no, but we need a accelerator, like, will you run it? We'll back it, et cetera. So that was the start of Stacks Ventures. And the focus for Stacks was always to build Web3 on Bitcoin, to like build smart contracts on Bitcoin. And I think that Manib is very, very smart. He's someone who is able to see around corners. Like there's several times where like he told me something that like was in the back of my mind, but he was just like, this is like what's going to happen. And I was like, oh shit, like that's 100% right. You know what I mean? And so, before Ordinals, we had actually already made a strategic decision with our LPs to invest more broadly in the Bitcoin ecosystem, because I think that as opposed to other ecosystems, like the Bitcoin ecosystem is very political. Like there's a lot of different ecosystems, as you know, Albert, who like don't necessarily don't compete in a collaborative way. Like some people in the Bitcoin ecosystem, they compete in a dirty fucking way. Like these people, like, it's not cool, and so like the whole idea was like, let's expand out. Like let's the Stacks ecosystem is very confident in what they have and what they built. I mean, it's very leading edge tech. It's pretty impressive. And so like we need to broaden the ecosystem, go after more builders. We want to broaden our investment focus. We've already invested in actually several Bitcoin startups that had nothing to do with Stacks at the time. And like like I think eventually, like if Stacks is the best tech, people will use it, right? So, but like we need to do more just like to grow the Bitcoin ecosystem. So we already had this in mind. And then when Ordinals came around, it was like, it just, I first of all, I've seen these type of things happen before. Like it's like when Lean Startup had a massive hype cycle when it first kicked off, right? Like I've seen these hype cycles before. So I could see all the signs with Ordinals, and it was just like, I was very compelled by it. And I thought it was a cultural movement for Bitcoin. And then, later found out maybe a few weeks later, or whatever, it's a new paradigm for development. Like every step along the way exceeded my expectations. I've been hosting a lot of Twitter spaces. By building Ninja Alerts, I knew, and trying to do marketing for Ninja Alerts, I realized like Twitter is where everything happens. Twitter space is the most important medium to get word out about your company, to build your reputation, to build your personal brand, et cetera. So I had been hosting Twitter spaces for like 6 months and like struggling, like we had like an average like 50 people per Twitter space for like 6 months. With NFT Now, who I partnered with because they have a massive following, like couldn't even do that on my own. So when Ordinals hit, like I was like, just like right time, right place, ready to go, made perfect sense. And my good friend over the years, who Albert, you actually know from back in the day as well, Jan, from
Yeah, it's a
the
good guy. Yeah.
Shanghai and Shenzhen days.
Yeah.
I actually had got him in, just like I roped you into into the Web3 space. I roped him into the Web3
Yeah,
space,
yeah.
like probably around the same time, because I was telling him about NFTs and like how it's a game changer. And he got into NFT trading and stuff like that. And then when he saw like, and Jan has always been creating content. He loves to create content. He used to run Startup Grind in China, which is like a community event, and they do a lot of speaking events. I spoke at his event back in the day. And so I was just talking with him. He was really wanted to start something around content and stuff like that. So I was like, yo, we should just do this Ordinals thing. Let's just, how do we start it? All right, let's just do it. Let's just do a Twitter space every day this week. This was like when Ordinals was had just passed. I think 10 did that. It blew up. It was crazy. I mean, there were, I think it was like I'd done 6 months of Twitter spaces, and I was tracking the metrics religiously. I think we had 15,000 listens over 6 months, like total. And then in 1 week of doing ordinal spaces, like we blew past that. Like, we had like one space with like 3,000 people, on it. And then I think it was like 50,000 or something like that in a week, like listens in a week of doing it. So it's just like very obvious, like there's something here. And yeah, I've had experience building communities. So it just like made sense to try to build a community around it, try to curate a community around it. Jan and I went to Leo as someone we wanted to, we approached Leo like, hey, do you want to do this with us, the show? Because I had known Leo through NFT Now. So NFT Now is kind of like the link here, because he was hosting the NFT history show. And Leo was also somebody who had a very different take on things. Like, I think that he had a different specialization and a different take on things, but there was a lot of overlap. Like in those Twitter spaces, like Leo was someone where we would exchange different points. We could always find like what we agreed on, and always like learn something from each other. So that's why I thought like Leo was the person that we went to work with for the show. And then, yeah, man, it was just about been consistency and trying to bring in as many people as possible, building the community. We've built a great group of, like, we have like for the people who are the regulars on the show, like we usually add them to like a Twitter group. We have a great like back and forth there. I think a lot of the people who we brought together in the community got a lot of value from each other as well. So I think that's been a key to the show being successful. Also, the fact that like the show fits into my goals directly in terms of Bitcoin Frontier Fund, to be able to bring the smartest people in the space together and learn from them, and is like the best, like the unfair advantage that Bitcoin Frontier Fund is going to have for a long time. So yeah, man, that's the story. I mean, it's just like you see an opportunity and you just go after it, and then enough years go by, you go after enough opportunities, you get better at it, and some of them are going to become something really meaningful.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. I love how everything's coming together as part of the master plan and reinforcing the other projects you're doing. And no doubt the Ordinal show is going to be a big unfair advantage for the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, not just for sourcing more projects, right? But also it's like you said, the best and brightest minds and most talented people are coming together and sharing their knowledge, so people are getting value from it. But not just that, they're also making friends with each other, right? Which also creates another level of innovation, right? It's really about the cross-pollination of ideas. And like you said, there's some bad actors in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So before we transition over to the last 15 minutes of Q&A, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Bitcoin Olympics, right? Because the Bitcoin Olympics was set out to do just that, right? As Trevor mentioned, Trevor got me into the Web3 space, right? And luckily I listened to you. What, this is like over 2 years ago now, right? I think you had told me about it, and like there was radio silence because I was like researching and figuring things out. And I said, all right, Trevor, let's do this, right? But then between then and me deciding to jump all in, is I met a lot of people, just asked people in the Ethereum space. Obviously, they all said, don't go to Bitcoin. Like you've already done 21 cohorts and you're going there to die, right? But then luckily I knew Trevor and some of his friends, and it seemed like, well, Ethereum had over 10,000 dApps at that time, but I couldn't even find 50 dApps on Bitcoin. And I said, well, this is the blue ocean, right? And then so the riskiest thing was, can the programmability really be there, right? And luckily we met some people like Stacks and some other groups that were developing this, right? So it wasn't a very big leap at that time. Once I figured out all the information that, hey, if this does come true, like basically you're taking tech that's already proven in Ethereum and you want to make it happen on Bitcoin. So the leap wasn't that big for that to happen, right? So I'm like, this is such a massive opportunity, right? And luckily we pulled the trigger early last year, right? So before any Web3 investors would come in, and then ordinals hit, and then we know what happened after that. So but along that path, as Trevor was saying, there's a lot of there's different people, right, in Bitcoin ecosystem. Some people are very collaborative, some people are not. It's like a rainbow, and there's people in between. So the Bitcoin Olympics is a nonprofit event to bring together people from different technology tribes to get them to work together. Because if we want to push the innovation frontier on Bitcoin forward, it's about cross-pollination of ideas between the greatest minds. And then what happened was it became a huge success. We became the first ordinals hackathon earlier this year. It was the biggest in terms of speakers and also team projects submitted at the time. And everyone loved it because they're like, this is the first time I've seen so much technology under one roof, right? And so we decided to do it again. We're going to launch it in October, but we're launching it now. We just launched it a few days ago. So the Bitcoin Olympics is going to be running from now until October 1st when you have to submit. And the good news is that the sponsors from before they're only giving a few $1,000s. Now the sponsors now are giving $25,000, $50,000. Why? Because we want to collectively create a hackathon with a prize pool large enough to attract people from Ethereum and other chains outside of Bitcoin to come build on Bitcoin, right? And also reward the people who are building on Bitcoin too for your innovations. So if you guys have that entrepreneur bug, but you're not ready to jump full in yet, come to the Bitcoin Olympics, right? It's a free event. It's all the prizes are 100% undiluted, meaning that the platform, again, we don't take anything for operating costs. You sign up, and if you win, 100% of the prizes go to the winners. All right, so this is a pretty significant event. The grand prize is also $30,000, which can be a game changer for a startup founder. Like that's definitely enough. Like Trevor knows, and I know it's definitely enough to go from ideation to raising a pre-seed. All right, so if used wisely. So guys, go ahead and check out at BTC Startup Lab, and then click on a link to sign up for the hackathon. All right. So enough about that. Let's turn this over to some questions. I see see, does anyone have any questions for Trevor? Okay, here we go. Boom. Add a speaker. All right, here we go. So we have our first person asking a question here. And I think Ord Basil also wanted to ask a question earlier. So all right, let's go with what is this? Bitcoin Grove at the Citadel.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, hello, Trevor. Can you hear Bitcoin?
Yeah,
Grove? Okay.
I can hear you.
All right, awesome. Go ahead.
So this is Ross, founder of the Bitcoin Grove over here, and I just wanted to follow up on some of the lean startup and just I guess shout out to Brant Cooper and some of the other early and Trevor and Eric Reese and these guys. Just back when I was doing a startup in 2015, I actually got funded by Brant Cooper from this sunflower seed competition, which my co-founder and I won. Which basically Adam Burke was the organizer. Shout out to Adam. He challenged startups to log 100 discovery interviews, kind of in a lean startup kind of validate your concept before you're wasting time building in a vacuum, get out of the building, and some of these things that Trevor had been talking about earlier in the space. And we were the first team to hit 100, and we won a little seed investment from that. And we went to market after, and within 11 months, we had product market fit. We had acquisition offers coming down. We sold the company literally from startup to acqui-hire within a year. Did 500 startups, the accelerator up in Boston. Yeah, the story goes longer, but I just wanted to validate a little bit that lean startup helps you not waste and get to product market pretty efficiently. So these guys, it works, and super excited to hear what we're doing here with the ordinals, bringing more people to Bitcoin, and accelerating the startups, providing more resources that are opening the door to the end of monetary enslavement through fiat and escape hatch with Bitcoin. So we got to build better businesses that make better Bitcoiners and solve real problems. So I love to see that lean startup, and you guys are behind this effort. So, cheers.
That's amazing, man. Dude, you bring me back, man. Adam Burke, Brand Cooper, love those guys. Dude, I would love to do some lean. We need to do more lean startup stuff in Bitcoin. I think it's really I think it's there's never enough. There's never enough. There'll never be an end of the supply of founders that need to validate their ideas, no matter what space you're in.
That's right. That's right. And speaking of lean startup, we're keeping it alive at the Bitcoin Startup Lab here. Trevor comes in and helps teams, and they're with raving results, right? On average, they pivot 5.5 times, but the teams that pivot many times, a lot of them got into the accelerator program, the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, right? And like a lot of them have raised money now. So it is an effective system. And thanks for sharing that, Ross. Do you have anything to add on to that, Ross? Any questions for Trevor here?
One last shout out to our lean startup mentor coach out in the Netherlands, who helped with that project and many others down the road. So he's like kind of packaged up a lot of the lean startup for corporates, in a way where, innovation accounting and kind of the customer development process could help R&D within larger operations. So he does that out in Netherlands. So Dow Wester, shout out to his operation. He was a big help for helping. It's a matter of like the genius in the room versus getting out of the building, and having people who have experience and can help be the guide. A good lean startup coach goes a long way. So I wanted to make sure I got that last shout out in.
Super.
Awesome.
Okay, wonderful. Who's up next? I think Ord Basil was requesting to speak, but I'm not sure if they're still here anymore.
Well, Ord Basil is another Miami thing. So the Bitcoin Grove here is a Miami hackerspace unified for Bitcoin builders, shared resources. And then Ord Basil, the event happening later, I could definitely speak on. It's just a showcase for the most culturally impactful inscriptions and some of the early inscriptions and some of the other cypherpunk messages communicated through art. So we'll be putting up displays and making sure we have a loud ordinal flag being waved throughout Art Basel in Miami.
Yeah, very cool.
Love that. And I love your space, man. I was there for the Bit Devs, Ross. I think we met as well, I believe. So
yeah, I recall cruising Biscayne. That was a good time in Bitcoin 23 with a lot of folks that got to come to Miami for the Bitcoin conference. I'm a little butthurt that they went to Nashville, but I understand, pulling back for Bitcoin 24.
Yeah. Well, Miami can't have everything. You know what I mean?
That's true. But I think the high signal, or at least a Bitcoin only type audience here remains. So someone will fill the vacuum what they're leaving behind, just like they kind of filled after the North American Bitcoin conference kind of became the blockchain direction after Vitalik, at the downtown Miami Night Center where he pitched at the Bitcoin conference, Ethereum. I think there's a long legacy of, some Bitcoin stuff happening here, which with the audience and the people finding Bitcoin that's solving a problem rather than maybe number go up, people coming from right now, Argentina, or Cuba or Venezuela, a place where they found Bitcoin because it really helped them. And they stay around, and they care a lot more than I think a lot of the spoiled number go up folks who are expecting to get more dollars out of their Bitcoin rather than solving real problems.
Yeah. Miami's great. Okay, are there any other questions? We're coming up on time right now. Coming up on time. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to invite Trevor back because his origin story is uh so flavorful. We're definitely not, we only like touched the tip of the iceberg today. But let me speak for the Bitcoin ecosystem. Thank you so much, Trevor, for doing everything, bring Lean Startup to the Bitcoin ecosystem, being such a staunch supporter of the Bitcoin Startup Lab, helping our students get into your program and getting funding. Also, the Ordinal Show again, super culturally significant, right? You guys were the first ones on the scene. In my opinion, I think it's because of the Ordinal Show how Ordinals took off so fast, right? A lot of people sort of take Bitcoin for granted and think it's going to be here forever. Nothing is here forever unless you fight for it. You got to fight for it, and you guys did just that, right? You guys, right as soon as Ordinals took off, you saw the opportunity there and the significance and what it meant for Bitcoin, and this movement became, I think it more or less was a Bitcoin renaissance, right? And this is like we're entering into a golden age of Bitcoin here, and you guys are carrying the torch for the keeping that culture alive, because I think we have a lot to thank for Ordinals, this invention in general, right? I mean, a lot of I don't think a lot of people were looking at the statistics, but last year I noticed that Bitcoin had dipped more than Ethereum for the first time ever in a crypto winter, right? Why was that? Well, because there's more utility happening on Ethereum, and people were beginning to wise up to it. And that was why for the first time ever, Bitcoin dipped more. So like that argument that it is a store of value, sure it is. But now Ethereum at that time was a better store of value. And then so we were actually really lucky to have Ordinals come up, right? Because it not only saved a lot of miners, but it also triggered this like explosion of ideas like on Ordinals and then beyond Ordinals, right? And then we've been seeing that at the Bitcoin Startup Lab. There's even people that, 1 year ago, they would say, hey, Albert, why don't you take this pre-accelerator and put it onto Ethereum or Polygon or something else? But 99% of the applicants, just like the last few months, all of them got the memo and they were applying to build on Bitcoin. And a lot of them, they had already launched their MVPs on testnet, on Ethereum or Polygon or other chains, and they just left. And they're rebuilding things now on Bitcoin. So this is like completely like, a different age for Bitcoin. So again, thanks, Trevor. You guys are doing your part. Great to have you as one of the top 30 top innovators on the Who's Who Bitcoin innovation of this year. So let me sign out, guys, because we're right here on the money. So again, the show is brought to you by Bitcoin Startup Lab. We're a top pre-accelerator in the Bitcoin ecosystem. We help you turn your ideas into investment-worthy startups so you could get into accelerators. And big shout out to our media partners, BTC Inc., parent company of Bitcoin Magazine, the top media on Bitcoin, and Crypto Slate, a crypto agnostic media platform that brings the latest happenings on Bitcoin to the rest of the crypto world. And of course, a big thank you to all of our teams and all the guest speakers that have come together to make this show possible and accelerate the advent of the Bitcoin economy. If you guys want to learn more about us, go to @BTC Startup Lab, @BTC Startup Lab on the Twitter, or now we know it as X. Sign up to the Bitcoin Olympics. If you feel like you're a little bit more advanced, sign up to our program. All the information is there. See in the Discord. And again, we have over $100,000 in prizes now for this hackathon. So jump in, meet some like-minded people, win some prizes, and above all else, have fun and build something awesome on Bitcoin. Thank you, Trevor, for joining us. Thank you, the audience, for listening.